Hey, what's up, guys? It's Vdecron, Vonic Dechronicus on Rosa. Today we're going to be going over a build that works in War and OPR especially, but can also, like, as a solo player going in OPR especially, you can really have an impact on the fight. What we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the abilities, then we'll talk about the attribute breakdown points, and then we'll talk about the build. I'll show what I'm running alongside what I've made as a New World buddy, which will be linked below here if you don't want to sit here and listen to this. Just check out the New World Buddy by all means. But yeah, this is the short and sweet. So let's get into why we picked the points we did. So stamina, you're going to be dodging a lot. With Blunderbuss against melee players, you're essentially playing the spacing game. So every bit of stamina you can get, rock, is amazing. So if you hit them 8 times, it gives you 8 stamina. So you get what I'm saying here? And if you see here, like, that would be if we had unload. So 6, ultimately, 6 stamina per shot. You shoot twice, that's 12 stamina, plus your natural regen. That can really add up and allow you to really kite effectively. Running gun, I think, is incredibly important. Otherwise, you essentially get caught by melee and then never get away. Reloading provides you 40% haste that lasts for 1 second. That's massive. We'll focus on passives first. Ramp, you're going to be reloading a lot. It's 2 shots reload, 2 shots reload. So the passive damage increase from ramp is pretty valuable. Yeah, we won't even talk about that. Fortifying aggression, I think this is great. Anytime you hit, you get a 10% fortify. So, like, as long as you're continuing to shoot, you are naturally tankier. Using an ability reduces all other ability cooldowns by 4%. So if you use all 3 abilities, right? When you use the first one, nothing else was on cooldown, so it doesn't matter. When you use the second one, this one goes 4% down. Use this one, this goes to 8% down. This one goes to 4% down, right? So, like, it's really about an 8% cooldown if you can keep your stuff rotating off on repeat, or like essentially 2 stacks of refreshing. But that's the most impact you'll have from this. I used to be a big fan of this, but with the nature of aim lock, I don't think you get nearly as much of a value out of this as you did before. But there is an argument for this. I will say that. I think on a roll, you have to run this. 3% fortify every time you do an ability for 10 seconds. Stacking 5 times, that's 15% fortify. So with that and this, that's 25% fortify passively that you can keep up by just being an offensive gamer. Last chance gives you another 30% fortify, only for 4 seconds, 30-second cooldown. But this can be the difference between whether you live or die here. So 25 turns into a 55% increase armor. Like, that's as if somebody put a warding bludgeon on you, except this lasts 4 seconds. That's pretty crazy. I actually see. I was playing around with this point, but I don't think this is valuable. But let's get into abilities. I'm actually gonna respec this though, just because I realized I taken that point. So first ability we're gonna run here is going to be net shot here. So this is literally where you push yourself back if you're not pushing forward on your character. If you're pushing forward, like you're moving forward with your character, you won't jump backwards, right? But if you are, like, let's say I'm kiting and I'm S key gaming and I net shot, I'll pull back, or I'm sidestepping, I'll pull back. It's very valuable as a movement increaser. Like, you want to be able to maintain that spacing where you can do damage to the melee player and they can't damage you. Plus, the slow you get from this is pretty massive. On top of that, as long as you hit somebody, the cooldown gets reduced by 20%. That's crazy, especially when we talk about the ultimate later. Now you're inflicting a 50% slow that degrades to normal movement speed over 7 seconds. Massive. 7 seconds. The cooldown is 18 seconds. You can already refresh it by 20% off this. Another 8% off that is 28% of the cooldown that you can just naturally completely ignore. Barbed netting, so it depends on what type of build you're running. I run a very, very elemental heavy damage build because I do not have pestilence yet. And so, like, mine is very much the discount build, if you will. So I actually get to benefit from this greatly. And we'll get into the benefits of this later. So this is either a one shot. So, like, remember, you're firing a shot, 70% weapon damage, slows the target, but it's just one hit. The initial hit goes from 70% to 30%. So you lose 40% damage, right? But over 3 seconds, you do 35%. That's 105% damage you're doing just off the bleed. 135 if you include the default hit compared to 70%. So this is dealing double the damage just over time. This is incredibly valuable when it comes to finishing off targets. There's plenty of times where I've used net shot on somebody and I've watched them bleed out from a quarter HP. So I'm a believer that barb netting is the way to go, personally. We already talked about this passive, 100%. We're going to run that. Next one we're going to do is splitting grenades. If you don't have splitting grenades on your blunderbuss, even if it's pestilence, I personally think you are throwing. Just simply put, splitting grenades is massive. So you shoot a grenade out, and then you can then make that grenade explode by pressing it again. When it explodes, provided you have the full upgrade here, right? Where are you? Oh no, it's just a natural part of it. Where it detonates, it creates 3 mini grenades. They disperse and they explode 1 second after landing, or 1 second after like exploding. So like you can, if you aim too high, it won't hit anybody at all. So you have to be very smart about where you're going to air burst this, if you will. Another thing we can do here because of that, or like the third ability we're going to run, is Blast Shot. So I actually only recommend running 2 points of this. So Blast Shot is a small AoE in front of you. You can knock people over who are not currently gridded. So like, let's say for example, in a war, right? You have people coming in on a crash and you're on the edge of that point. If you see that they're cleanse potting, they are still susceptible to staggers, even if they've cleansed. You can literally get rid of half of their cleanse just with one good blast shot. And then of course, applying a rend, you're never going to say no to a 6-second 10% rend. Now, if that person has a cleanse on there, so like a very specific situation, it doesn't apply it. But if they don't have that, you're more likely to kill that person, or someone's more likely to kill that person. As you saw, we were running this. And then at this point, we have 2 points. What was the other thing I was running? Buckshot. I think having a little bit of burst at the beginning is actually pretty worthwhile. But honestly, this one you could trade for the bite back if you want to use the aim lock less. But I would highly recommend, I'll show you why the aim lock is just absolutely busted. So I wouldn't personally run that. Otherwise, you run the last point as double down. Once every 30 seconds, your next ability used will have its cooldown reduced by 50%. So let's remember, so with net shot, right? We throw it, we hit. That means if we have that ability up, it now gets reduced by default to 9 seconds. Another 20% is like 7 seconds. 8% from using my 2 other abilities. Like, you're basically seconds away from using your second net shot. I would show you, but I don't have a target dummy near me. What I'll do is I'll try to splice something in here. We'll see. Anyways, wait a second. Sweet. So that is the Blunderbuss. Ice Gauntlet, you're going to run the same Ice Gauntlet abilities as Frozen Paladin, in my opinion. So, like, the point here is that you're really using ice to control space. So, putting an ice wall to block one of the doors in the middle of Soul if you're an OPR, so that people can't push in easily. In a war, being able to block off the edge of point or block off a point of escape for somebody who has pushed too far from their group, so you can isolate somebody and take them out. Entomb is natural for safety purposes. Ice Storm allows you to break up healer circles as well. It's really good at area denial. Very rarely will healers just heal through an Ice Storm. Just because they'll ultimately lose that 12% healing that they get for being at max HP. But if, just real quick, just to go over it, like I already explained Ice Storm, I already explained Ice Shower, Entomb. Things you really got to remember is that Entomb, you want to run Cleansing Entomb here because this allows you to essentially have a cleanse potion on cooldown. You want to be smart about your Entombs. You should never Entomb at max stamina, for example, because you're going to generate stamina inside of it. You should be entombing as a way to avoid having to dodge out and loot and become exhausted, to be clear. I'm a big believer in movement speed wins games. So quick frost, for example, increase movement speed by 10% in a frosted area. I would highly recommend running this. There's also refreshing frost and defiant freeze. Both give you a massive boost when you use abilities. The goal here is to be tanky enough that you are left alone. Armor wise, let me see something. Those fill ice gauntlet. Here we go. So this will be linked down below. This is the build guide I'm recommending here. As you see here, I'm not running Lingering Flow. I actually do run the bike back like we talked about. And I don't run the reloading over here. Everybody has personal preferences. Just understand that, like I explained, why there may be differences in the abilities you have here. Armor-wise, if you're running OPR, you want to have 5 stacks of Shirking Heels flat out. The Venturing Claw Shot, we were playing around with whether we would run Claw Shot instead. The only reason you would run Claw Shot in this build is you would replace the Blast Shot with that for 2 points, and you'd end up being forced to run Unload, to be clear. But that would be more of a healer chaser build. This is more of a clump deleter build, where your focus is on doing AoE damage and being able to lock down individuals using net shot who are trying to get away. So I'm just gonna literally, as you see here, what's nice is it's very easy. I would really recommend using this website to like catalog your build so you can figure out what you're aiming for, what are you striving for. Otherwise, it can be very hard to like truly feel like you're going in a direction, right? So knowing we have this extra ability, I would never, to be clear, run Crippling Blast Shot. I know the slow may seem enticing, but you can just run a better ability is the best way I could put it. So in this case, you have a lot of weapon damage, right? So we could easily just go with a quick Thorny Reflection here because we went Hasted Vigor on our chest piece. The reason you go Hasted Vigor, by the way, boys and girls, is the fact that like you are always going to have a dot on you, right? So having that extra 10% haste can be the difference between whether you break the tracking. Like I hear people complain a lot about Void Blade tracking where they're left clicking, you can never get away from them. That 10%, you break a contact even once and it's over. They will not catch you. Exhaustive Net Shot is pretty massive. The reduction in stamina regeneration is pretty valuable. I would even argue that if you're literally a pure solo player, you don't care about the clump, running this on your actual Blunderbuss may be worthwhile. Otherwise, we're running Azoth Conductors for the artifact for the pants here. We threw Shirking Heels on this because naturally this is aimed towards OPR players, as that is a majority of the gamer base within the PvP community. Very small group of us actually do wars. So those of us doing OPRs a lot and arenas a lot, these are the type of builds that'll be able to help you feel like you have an impact in the fight. This is pretty massive. We end up splitting the damage on well, like with the Blunderbuss, your splitting grenades is elemental damage, your net shot is elemental damage, your regular shots are thrust damage, and with this build, I am running Pestilence here, so you're not actually able to convert the damage. That being said, you're still doing stacks of poison, which is elemental damage. Your Ice Gauntlet is doing 3 types of damage here, 3 types of elemental damage. The reason for that, like you can actually change this because the reason I actually swapped to wanting to recommend Ankh is because Elemental Band here is disabled. But if you were going to run Elemental Band instead of Ankh, what you would do is swap out Pestilence for a Gorgon Blunderbuss running Disdained Infliction, Plagued Splitting Grenades, and Plagued Crits. In fact, I actually have that exact Blunderbuss just as a 700. I got lucky. I 2-perked this. So Disdained Infliction, Plagued Splitting Grenade, Plagued Crits. The dots you have from Splitting Grenades and the dots you have from the Barbed net is just absolutely massive. So like we're really trying to maximize our impact through that. Making it so like that passive damage that people are receiving means that the moment that they're brought low, they just die. All right, coming back to the build though. For your ring, honestly, I'm torn past Hardy and Invigorated Punishment. The third one, I decided to go with Crippling just because the slow ultimately is why you're able to catch people, right? And if you can catch them and then keep them at a distance that they can't catch you, the longer they're slow, the longer you're hasted, the easier it is to do just that. And so you just by default win every fight with proper positioning. Earring wise, I could understand replacing regenerating with either a refreshing. I don't think you would replace fortifying toast with empowering toast, to be clear. And of course you're going to run refreshing toast here. Ankh is a pretty given one. This is because it's the Shrinking Heals build. If this was the War build, that's probably when I would run Elemental Band instead. But even as a quad DPS, Shrinking Heals is still good as for Blunderbuss Ice Gauntlet because you're gonna get less heals if you're the one person off away from your group. But yeah, so let's see. We've covered abilities, we've covered armor. Let's talk about attribute breakpoints. So I'm torn still between 350 strength and 350 intelligence. You can play with either one. I tend to notice I get a lot more kills with 350 strength. But like if you're going all in on the dots objectively, you'd want to be able to hit that 250 intelligence. Now, there's ways, and I can address this if people have an interest in it. There's cheesier builds like that you can use to make it so you can do stupid things like running 50 con and just you have to avoid ranged heavy comps when you're doing this, right? But those are not war capable builds. And I want to focus on builds that you can practice as an individual player that increase your chances of being able to get in those wars through your OPR gameplay. So yeah, we went with 2 flame conditioning here. Ultimately, with our fortify and our ward, our resistances overall, we're sitting at 10% across the board. We want to have that 20% flame conditioning because there's usually a lot of fire staffs, a lot of blunderbusses, and there's a lot of blunderbuss damage that is fire objectively. That are seen in OPR, right? On top of that, we have like a lot of we have some thrust conditioning as well. Like we have 1 thrust conditioning on our helmet, we have 1 slash conditioning on our chest piece. We also have on our amulet strike protection. To be honest, with this build, you could probably swap the strike protection out. I'm just trying to think of like, because we only get 1 artifact, what is the perk? I'm still probably going to just have that on my build. It's probably going to be strike protection if I play any sort of clump build. Otherwise, you could easily swap this to thrust as well, and that would bring you up to about 30% thrust resistance anytime you started getting hit by thrust at all, which I think would be pretty valuable. Now I'm going to always keep strike on my amulet because I just love playing in the clump, and my main builds require strike protection. These builds are my builds, so that's why some of these perks may seem a little off, and why by watching this video you know what to look out for in this actual New World buddy. But yeah, otherwise, standard consumables. I didn't waste my time adding them here, but health potion, regeneration serum. You probably run regeneration potions if it's an OPR objectively. But otherwise, it would be tier 4 oak flesh bomb, tier 4 gemstone dust, maybe a flame absorption pot. Those would be the 3 that would dance between those 2 spots. And remember that if you're playing OPR, there's these things called Zephyr Cakes. So that extra 10% haste, now you're sitting at a potential 30% haste when you're reloading. That can be the difference between life or death, especially when you have that group of 5 that are fanboying off of you. But yeah, this is the build. It'll be linked down in the description below. I'm big into one-cut videos. I'm just going to get you the information. I'm not going to spend a week making that really professional video. So I hope you learned from this. If you'd prefer that these took a little bit longer and maybe we're a little bit more refined, you let me know. But let's see how you guys like it. Let's talk about rotations, right? So let's pretend like this middle point here is like this little circle here is the point, right? If I'm a blunderbuss in a quad group, that means I'm a quad DPS. So I'm either on the right side or the left side of point, right? That's where I should be, right? I'm going to be placing my ice storm in that general area of the point. I'm going to be trying to keep my ice storm on the edge of point outwards. Make it so like people have to really go around if the ice gauntlets on the point are doing their ice walls appropriately in order to actually stay on the point, right? When it comes to abilities, when I hear that my shot caller is like, hey, crash on right middle in 3, 2, 1. And crash right middle, crash right middle, crash right middle, crash right middle. And then on the edge, when I see people starting to run, I'm using the blast shot to push them right back in. They're rended, they're staggered, they can't pot, nothing. If I'm in an OPR, I'm just kind of looking for healers. What you need to make sure you do is have the aim lock enabled, and it makes it pretty brain dead. It really does. You just literally follow them around, left click them, and they can't really get away. Really make sure though with the aim lock, the biggest quote unquote skill check, if you will, is about not firing right after they dodge. So like if you're using the aim lock system, iframes technically last longer because you should not shoot until about like half a second or so after they have rolled. Otherwise you will miss. I think it's actually a really healthy balance change. I wish they would just get rid of it completely, but it's not nearly as bad as it was before. Still lots of work that needs to be done because it kind of removes all the skill behind the weapon, in my opinion. It's very easy to S key, very easy to break people's camera if they're not using it, where you're just spinning around them essentially. Um, Very easy to just follow somebody around, where no matter how good they are at juking you and getting around people, you'll always know where that person is. So otherwise, I'm gonna be streaming tomorrow, Monday, at from 10 a.m. most likely to about 3 or so. So come join me. We'll be playing some of these builds, these two builds that we've released on this channel, and you can see them played for yourself at ttv/vdecron. Have a good one, boys.